Let's take a look at producing your first song or kind of a scratch track or skeleton track in Reason 10. And this is going to be for the complete newbie to Reason. Say if you've just bought the program or you've had it and just have been a little bit confused about how to get things going. We're going to cover laying down your drums, getting your melodies in, chords and things like that. A bit of the sequencer and a few other areas as well. And we're not going to be creating a masterpiece here. This is just covering the fundamentals of getting a basic track out and getting your ideas out into the DAW. Now you should already have your audio device set up as well as your external controller. If you're watching this, you can do that by coming to the edit menu and choosing preferences. And then on the general tab here, actually I want to just make a quick note that I am using the dark theme. So if my interface here looks a bit different than yours, that's what that's about. And for your audio device, you can come here, click this drop-down menu and select a device. Now I am using my Windows audio because this is the only way that I can capture the audio from the DAW to my screen capture program. But you can make your selection there, choose your sample rate, buffer size, and so on. Control surfaces, you can click the auto detect after you've installed any drivers for your MIDI controller and plugged it in, powered it on, and then Reason may find it, and you may not have to add it manually, but you can also click the add button to add it manually. And we'll go ahead and come out of here. One other thing that you may notice is different than what you're seeing if you are, just starting out with Reason. Actually, we'll come really quickly back to the edit and preferences. At the bottom here, the default song, I have empty selected, but by default, this is going to come on the empty plus effects. But I prefer to start with a blank slate and just start from scratch because I don't want to be influenced by anything that's in here. Plus, I may not even want to use those devices that they have in there by default. So that's why this may look a little bit different than what you're seeing. Now, when creating my tracks, I will typically start with drums, but you can start with a melody using a piano or a synth or a pad. You could do chord progressions and play around with that. There really is no wrong way to get your ideas out, as long as you get them out. That's what's most important. But since I do typically start with drums, that's what we're going to begin with. And there are several different ways that you can lay down your drums. The first is to record them live with a MIDI controller. And this is actually what I recommend because you're going to be able to kind of touch the music, so to speak. I feel like the less coding can get in the way of expressing your ideas, the better. And playing the MIDI controller live is going to allow you to do that. The second way is to program them manually in your piano roll or drum editor. And there's nothing wrong with this if that's the way that you want to do it. That's actually how I first started off. And we can't expect to be good at everything. If you're a piano player or a guitar player, if doing programming the drums manually is going to work better for you, then as long as you're able to create your song, that's what's most important. But I do recommend taking the time to learn how to record them live on your controller as you have time. Now, the third way is to use loops or Rex files. And with this, some people may be against loops. I used to be. But again, as I just said, we can't be good at everything. So if we are a vocalist and we play the guitar or some other instrument, if we're doing everything ourselves, sometimes it can help to have the loops to, say, work with the drums because we can get some really quality loops. And this is going to take a burden off of our shoulders because not all of us have the money to go out and hire a session drummer. I'm having problems talking on this tutorial. But yeah, not all of us can go out and hire musicians to do all of these parts, and we can't be masters of everything. So the loops provide us a way of having quality drums on our track if we suck at programming or playing live. And we're actually going to take a look at this method first using the Rex files. We'll briefly take a look at using loops, but we'll start with the Rex files because this is kind of the format that Reason works with. And I actually really like this format a lot. There's a lot that you can do with Rex files, and we'll see a bit of that in a second here. And actually, before we even get to that, just know that it's going to be really important to learn your function keys to navigate within Reason. This is going to save you tons of time. Now we can close and expand these different areas by clicking. We can double click on the header there, like so. We can click on these circles there. But using your function keys, F3 for the browser, F5 for the mixer, F6 for the rack, and F7 for the sequencer is just going to save you a lot of time, and you can really navigate around much more quickly. And we can even do things like pressing F6 and F7 at the same time to see our rack and sequencer. But I'm just going to press F6 to show our rack here. And then we're going to take a look at the instruments palette and start from there. The browser is kind of where we're going to begin everything with our song creation and access our instruments, our effects, our utility devices, and the players. So we'll come back to instruments, and we're going to work with Rex loops to lay our drums down. So we'll go ahead and just drag that Dr. Octo Rex in, and we are going to have a default patch that loads, and we will be in browse mode by default. We can tell by this orange highlight on the folder there. But I'm going to come and choose a drum patch. I'm just going to come to the factory sounds. Actually, I'm going to the wrong area here. What do I want to do? I actually want the Dr. Octorex patches. I'll double click on that. And we've got drums. We'll do acoustic drums. We're going to kind of do, I don't know what song we'll do, but let's see this first one here. And let's try out the first one. So these are actually patches, and they contain loops inside of them. They're not the actual loops themselves. So when I double click on this, it will load into the Dr. Octorex. Now we can see we have these 8 buttons. These are our actual individual loops. And so if I expand out the programmer here, then we can see this is the loop contained within the first one here. If I select 2, then we can see that loop there. And then this allows us to add variations within our drums, and a simple way to spice up our drums. Whereas if you're working with a traditional audio loop, you're going to have to drag those loops in and place them. With this, we can actually just hit record and press these buttons while it's recording and change between the different variations. Now I actually have my MIDI controller pad set up to trigger these different buttons to play back the variations while recording. Now I'm going to press the spacebar to play back and just see how this sounds. Okay, and we can see this is playing back a bit fast. Our original tempo for this is 113, and we can see the BPM next to all of these files here within the browser. I'm actually going to drop the tempo down. I think this may work to 95. I'll press enter to accept that. I'm going to press the spacebar to play back again. Yeah, I kind of like that. So we can switch between our loops by clicking on these buttons. Okay, yeah, I actually really like this one. Now, when we press these buttons, we have the option to determine when it's going to change, whether it's going to be on the next bar, the next beat, or the next 16th note. And we're just going to keep it simple here and leave it at bar for this tutorial. And so if we would like to place one of these loops within our sequencer, I will F6 and F7 to bring up both of the rack and the sequencer at the same time. So we want to start with this first one, for instance. So we can come, I'll hold down Control, set the left loop locator, and then I will hold Alt and set the right loop locator. And then here we have copy loop to track, and I can just click that. And then we have this enable loop playback. So whenever we press the space bar, it's going to play back our loop within the Dr. Octorex. But since we've placed that within our sequencer, I'm going to go ahead and deactivate that. And then let's go ahead and play back. Okay, now I'm going to hold down Alt and set the right locator there, and then set the left locator, and then I'm going to play back. So I think I'm going to put this number 2 within the new loop here to add a bit of variation, and then we'll just set up a loop here and cycle between that. So we'll copy that pattern to track. I'm going to hold down Control and set our left locator back at the beginning there. I'm going to press 1, which will take our song position cursor to the beginning of our loop. Okay, now the loop is not actually activated within our sequencer. We can press the / on our numeric keypad to activate that, and then we can see that this button is now active. That is our loop function. So that will toggle on and off. We'll go ahead and leave that on. I'll press 1 again to come back to the beginning of our loop. And actually, just know that we can even do this in a simpler way. If I come to bar 8 here, and as I mentioned, we can click on these to add it. It's going to add automation to our sequencer and change between these different loops. But I'm going to use my pads on my MIDI controller just to give you an idea of how this works. So I'll go ahead and enter into record mode, and I'm going to use my pads to trigger these buttons to change between the different variations. I need to enable loop playback. I'll stop. And let me rewind by pressing 4 on the numeric keypad. I'm going to press C to turn on the click track and the asterisk to record. Notice that these are changing when I'm triggering my controller. Okay, and we'll go ahead and stop there. And so now we can see that we have automation that's been recorded that is going to trigger. And we can see that we have this green border now that I pressed the space bar really quickly and stopped again. So we now have this automation that's going to change our different loops based on what we've done here. And we can actually even change what loop plays back by clicking on this arrow and select a different one. But we've already laid down our information in that loop, and we're just going to roll with that for the time being. I'm going to select all of this and then press delete to get that out of there. Come back to the beginning of our sequencer. And I'm actually going to right click here. And what I'm looking for is to clear that automation out. So we've got a basic 4-bar drum loop. And now let's add an instrument, let's say a piano. So I'll come over to the instruments. Let's come down to our radical piano. I'm going to press F6 to maximize the rack, drag that radical piano in. Now we have a variety of presets that we can choose from. I'm going to go with, let's do the nice grand here. I'm going to increase the ambience there on that. Okay, let's see if we can do something with this piano and drum track together. They may not go together, but we'll see here. So we've got our loop set up. I'm just going to go ahead and play back. I'm going to F6 and F7 so we can see. I'm going to press a decimal on my numeric keypad to come back to the beginning of our track. They may not go, but we'll see. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how the process goes for me. Oh, I think, okay, we're just gonna roll with that, guys. Let me see if I can get this. I'm gonna enter into record in a second here by pressing the asterisk on our numeric keypad. Okay. So I'm not quite happy with that. I'm going to exit recording and delete that out. Give it another go. I'm going to press. So what I'm doing here is my piano playing is a little bit sketchy, so I'm going to exit by pressing escape out of here, and I'm going to F7 to maximize the sequencer, and let's just bring this clip into full view. So my piano playing is a little bit sketchy now. I just wanted to fix the velocity on a couple of those notes, so we can access the individual MIDI information within this clip by double clicking. And then I'm going to F3 to close out the browser, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift and use my mouse wheel to zoom out a bit, hold Shift and use the mouse wheel to scroll over a little bit, and I'm trying to find those really loud velocities, and I think we can see those here. So I'll press W to access the pencil tool and just take this down a little bit. It was a little bit jarring the way it was played. So let me come back to the beginning, press the space bar, and let's hear if that makes it sound a bit better. I escaped out of there. I think that's gonna work. I'm gonna F6 to come back to the rack. Add a bit more of this ambience in there. Okay, I'm gonna F3, come to the browser. Let's add another instrument in there. Maybe some strings. This is just kind of a random track that we're creating. I'm gonna use the NNXT. Come to strings. Let's try this first one out. I'm going to put a touch of reverb on the strings here. So come to the effects, bring in this RV7000. I'm going to put this on film score. Let's take this dry wet down a touch. I want to raise the EQ on that. F7 to come to the sequencer, and let's go ahead and try to record that. I'm gonna go ahead and enter record. I'm going to F6 and come back to the rack and just take this down a little bit. So you can see where we're going here. We can keep on adding instruments. We could come to the instruments palette and just keep adding and building this out. You know, the main idea that I want to get across in this tutorial is to show you my method, and hopefully this will help for you as a newbie to see how you can go about getting your melodies down, getting your chords down, and fleshing out your song or your track. So we could even work around with some melodies on the piano if we go ahead and just be sure that our MIDI is directed towards the piano. I'm going to actually... So we'll play back and just experiment with melodies. We don't have to even record. We can just play around until we have the idea that we'd like. So I'll go ahead and play back. Okay, so you can see how we can really come in here and experiment, and then we could just enter into record and get that melody down, and it's going to be added to, I'll F7 and come back to the sequencer, added to those original chords that we put down. I'm going to press Q to bring back my arrow tool. Now, of course, we could build out our drums just simply by holding Control, and then we can drag that out again, or we could even Control C and then Control V to copy and paste that and add that out. Now we can select that kind of breakdown here, Control C, and then set our position cursor there, Control V, and now we've got our breakdown. We can Alt-click to extend our loop out, and then we can, again, Control-C. Let me stop playback with the spacebar. We can, on our piano chords, we can Control-C there, and then Control-V to extend that out. We can even double-click and come in. I'm going to hold Shift and use my mouse wheel to scroll in a bit, and then F3 to close out the browser. Then we can come in and even manually manipulate our MIDI data if we're not a good piano player. So the possibilities are endless here. And I'm just going to escape out of there. And then let's come back. And of course, we've got our strings here, which we can hold Control and bring that out to add an additional clip, or we could have just copy and pasted. Now, as you can see, you can continue to build this out, add more instruments. If you wanted to record vocals, then we could F6 come to the rack, and then I'm going to right click, and then at the top here we have create audio track, And as long as you've set up your audio device, then you will be able to record your audio, even if it's a live instrument that you would like to record and add to the instrumentation that we've already done, you can do that. Or if you wanted to add some singing. I have no audio input because I am using my Windows drivers in order to capture this audio for the tutorial. So that's why I have no audio input. But you could always click there, and you'd want to choose mono for most instances. And we'll go ahead and close that out. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just right click on this device. Or actually, I'm just going to be sure that it's highlighted and press delete and delete that out. And we will actually delete everything else out in here. And we're just going to start from scratch and take a look at, I'm going to F3 and come back to the browser. We're now going to take a look at recording your drums live. Let's see, before we even go there, I'm going to, take a look at our traditional loops and how we can bring those in. So I'll come to my library here, which is something that I've set up to go to my sounds and samples within this computer. So we'll come to loops, and I will F7 to bring up the sequencer. I'm going to create an audio track. And I'm just going to drag this in. Stop that auto preview. I'll press 1 to take that back to the beginning of our first locator, play back. Okay, so we can hear we have a drum loop. This is an audio loop. Now, how can we work with this in here? Because as you can see, it's not matched up to the end of bar 5 here. What we could do is really just count this out to see how many bars it is. So I'm going to turn on the click track. Actually, I don't want to turn on the click track. So we'll play back and just count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's 4 bars. So we can hold down Control and just drag that out. This is an easy one. And we can actually see the BPM is here 100, so that's why it's pretty easy. We're already on 95. But now that we have done the control and stretched that out to our bars here, we can at any point now just change our tempo. I'll raise this up to 120. I'll put 110. Now you can hear that that's starting to degrade. We only have so much amount of play and how we can alter our loops from their original tempo. And the very last thing before we move on to recording our drums live is we can change our loops to Rex loops. And then this is going to give us a lot more flexibility in working with them within reason. We can do some really cool things with them. So we can do that by double clicking. Then we open up the editor here, and we can see we have these slice markers that show up. There's quite a few there. So you could always come in and we can delete some of these out. I'll click this first one, say there, and then hold down Shift, click there, and then press delete on the keyboard to take those out of there. Say I'll select this first one, hold down Shift, and then delete those out. And now I'm going to right click on this and then bounce clip to Rex loop. Okay, and now the browser automatically goes to all of our self-contained samples, which is we can also access by coming here, song samples, all self-contained samples. I'll double click. Now we can see this is our audio loop that we brought in, but now in the form of a Rex loop. So I'm going to, in the sequencer, just go ahead and delete that loop out. And then I'm going to F6 and come to the rack, select that audio track, delete that out. And I'm actually going to bring in another Dr. Octo because I just want to show you really quickly. I'll right click on this device, reset, and then come to our song samples, all self-contained. Here's that loop. Now it's playing back at our, actually I think, let me see. I'm going to stop that auto preview. Now I'm going to press the spacebar to play back. Raise that tempo up to 100. Okay, so now we have access to individual slices on this loop or Rex file now. So I'm using my MIDI keyboard to play back these samples. Now, if I activate this select slice by MIDI, now we can see that we have access to that, and that's just awesome to me. That's just, I love it. And we can even perform some edits to each individual slice. We can change the pitch. We can pan it. We can adjust the level, the decay. We can reverse it. Send it to a different output. If I tab around to the back, then we can see that we have these different outputs. So we could send that out and process it even further with a different effect device from here. So I'll tab again to come around to the front. I just wanted to quickly show you that, how you can change your audio loops to rec files and do some other tweaking with that. So I'm going to press delete to delete this device out of there. And now we're going to take a look at recording our drums live. So I'll come to Instruments palette and let's bring in that Kong Drum Designer. Now we have a kit that's loaded by default, and I should have immediate access to play these pads. I'm going to use the pads on my MIDI controller. Okay, and let's see. Let's try a couple of kits here. I'm not going to... Now, typically, I don't work with kits. I'll right-click on this Kong and reset it, clear out the pads, and then I'll spend actually quite a bit of time looking for the drum sounds that I want to use in each one of these. And a lot of times I'll use field samples and edit those. So if I expand out this area here, we can see we have the NN Nano sampler, and we can take a look at the individual samples that are being used. So once I load my drum sounds or field samples, if it's a field sample, for instance, then I can click on this edit sample and then come in. If I play back, we can see that, and then just make some edits to that sample to get it how I want. But we're not going to go there just in this tutorial today. We'll keep it a little bit simple. So I'm going to go ahead and close that programmer up. I'm going to take this pitch down. Okay, so I'm not really that happy with the sounds that I'm hearing, but we could be here all day, so I'm going to go ahead and well, maybe I'll give this another shot here. Okay, I think I like this one better. So I just took that pitch down even a bit further. I'm going to try to take this decay down a bit. let's expand out the programmer to see. So this is being sent to the reverb there. So I'm going to, on the bus effects here. So see, we have the room reverb on the bus, and this is turned up quite a bit. So I'm going to take that down actually a little bit. I don't want all that reverb. And I want to really lower that pitch some more too. And we've already got, let's see, I'm going to come to Effects 2, and I'm going to put a filter on this. I want to put a low pass. Adjust the resonance here. Okay, so I hope this sounds okay. I'm actually using some like super cheap headphones, so hearing the frequencies is a bit difficult. But we're gonna roll with this. Okay, now I am going to F7, come to our sequencer, and I usually will do a 4-bar loop when I'm recording the drums live. So I'm going to set the right locator, holding Alt and clicking in the ruler there. And I'm going to hold Control to set the left locator there. What about the BPM? I'm going to change this to 130. And our loop is still active. We can tell that by seeing here. And actually I'm going to F6 to come back to the rack. And I want to adjust that. I may trigger this close together, so I want to be sure that I don't have any phasing issues. So I'm going to, oh, it's actually already on monophonic. So in this way, no matter how many times we trigger this close together, it's going to cut itself off, for lack of a better way of describing. If we had not, if this was not set to monophonic and we say had this on full, it's going to be pretty messy there. So we want to have that on monophonic. We'll close that back up. I'm going to press F6 and F7 so I can see both the sequencer and the rack at the same time. And then I'm going to go ahead and press the asterisk to enter in recording and see how this goes here. I just exited recording because my click track isn't on, so I'm going to press C to turn that on, and then the decimal symbol to come back to the beginning. I'm going to take that volume down just a little bit of the click track. We can do that by clicking there. Press the decimal symbol to come back to the beginning of the song. And I should enter into record mode, shouldn't I? So I will come back to the beginning of the song again, press the asterisk. So I'm going to F7 to maximize the sequencer. Let's double click on that. F3 to close out the browser. I'm going to hold Shift and use my mouse wheel to scroll through here. I'm going to press S to turn the snap off. I typically don't quantize my MIDI data, and I'm sure some of you will think I'm crazy, but I like to have some imperfections in there. We're getting it pretty close, but Okay, so I'm gonna escape out of here then, and then let's I'm gonna press C to turn that click track off, F6 to come back to the rack, F3 to open up our browser. Let's choose instruments and come to this palette, and then let's see what we can bring in. I will choose the grain, good old grain. And what do I want to use? We kind of default to chords and textures. I'm going to press this arrow to move up one folder, and then here we can see we can access, let's try plucks, bells, and stabs. We can see that that's the folder we're currently working in. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and then make my way down. I'll double click to load that patch. We can see that that's loading. And now I'm going to press the up arrow on my keyboard to move to the next patch. Okay, I'm going to turn the click track on because I think we got something here. Okay, I'm going to F7 to show the sequencer, enter into record. I'll exit recording. I'm going to delete that extra note out by double clicking. I'm going to F3 and close out the browser. Snap is still turned off, so I'm going to move some of these a bit. I think I liked I'm going to double click and add an extra one of these in there and drag that out a bit. Now I'm going to escape out of there, come back to our drum. I'm going to hold Control and Shift, use my mouse wheel to zoom out a bit. I'm going to turn the snap back on, change that to 8th. I'm going to double click to delete that one out of there. Change the snap to 16th. Press R for the razor. I'm gonna change the snap to 30 seconds with the razor still selected. Press Q to bring up the arrow tool, double click to add that. Change my snap back to 8th. change my snap to 16th, press R for the razor tool. Press Q for the arrow tool. I'm going to just delete one of these out. Press R for the razor tool, change the snap to 32nd, cut this one up a little bit. I'm going to press escape to come out of there, press Q to bring up the arrow tool. Now I'm going to F3. I'm going to press C to turn off that click track. I pressed F4, okay. F6 to come back to the rack, F3 for the browser, and I'm going to stop that just for a second, just to give the ears a bit of a rest from hearing that pattern in the melody. So I just want to add one more element, and I think that I'm not going to go into manually adding the drums because we just did a combination of recording them live and tweaking them manually, so you can see how that's done and how you can work with using the quantize setting and the arrow tool, as well as the razor, and how you can work with that. You know, this is just one method of working within Reason and how I you know, might go about it. But I think I am just going to find one more element for this track that we're building out, just so you can get see a little bit more of how I would go about working on this. So I'll come to the instruments here, and then let's bring in a Europa. And I'm really not that familiar with a lot of some of these new patches in these new devices, so this one may not work. I feel like a lot of the bass sounds in here are maybe for electronic, but we may be able to find something here. So I'm going to start from the bottom again. Don't ask me why I'm doing it. It's just for so long I've always started from the top, and sometimes you don't make it all the way down to the bottom. So we'll start from the bottom, and let me take that volume down. Hopefully I didn't blow anyone's eardrums out. I'm going to go ahead and press the space bar to start playback. That one's just a bit too busy. Okay, so I kind of like this one. We just need to I'm just going to go ahead and do this one. I'll F7 to bring up the sequencer, activate recording. Deactivate recording. I kind of don't like that second note though. I'm gonna hold down shift, scroll, release the shift and scroll down. Let's try I'm gonna pull that back and just take the velocity down. I'll press W to access. Hopefully the velocity will change the way that that's behaving at the beginning. Not really. I'll press Q to bring back the arrow tool, draw that back under there. Escape, press F6 to come back to our rack. I'm gonna adjust the attack. Take this envelope down a bit. I don't think the filter's on that one. Let's select this other one. Okay, then I want to come back to the instruments palette, and I'm kind of getting lost in this now. For you guys will have to. This is actually good for you to see. Some of you may not like this choice, but this is when knowing your chords and scales would be amazing. Okay, but you can see where that could go. I actually would probably get those first two notes, record that, and then open up the clip that has the MIDI information and then draw in the chords that I hear in my head, because I know what I want it to sound like, but I don't know the keys well enough on the keyboard here. So I think we're going to wrap up here. We're probably going on over an hour now, maybe. I feel like I've been talking for a while. So I hope that this has been useful enough, and that you've gained some tips and information that's going to help you in your production, and that you see a bit behind the scenes of how I go about creating my stuff and a few methods that I use. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thanks for watching. Take care, guys.